Greetings and salutations, science fiction fans. Who's ready to talk some plot theories? Today I want to discuss if there's something more to Baby Yoda's force use than simple coma-inducing mudhorn lifts. But before we go there, I have a question for you. Do you ever find yourself craving saltine crackers? You know, those little white and brown squares that you get in packs of 2 with your soup? Have you ever stopped to wonder why you crave something so bland? We'll get back to this. It is a relevant question. But first, let's talk about our main man, the Mandalorian. Specifically the part of the story where he left a baby on a flatbed in an unlocked ship with the expectation that said baby would still be there when he got back from hunting up work. As Pele so bluntly put it, he has a lot to learn about taking care of a young one. And yet, just an episode ago, we saw him order bone broth for Baby Yoda. Why is that important? You ask? He wanted to get his baby something to eat. In of itself, it's not a huge deal. And after all, he did witness Baby Yoda gulp down a whole frog with no negative consequences. It's entirely possible that he was smart enough to deduce from this that this species are carnivorous and require a lot of calcium. Bone broth is probably readily available at an agricultural town, like where the cantina where he stopped, and bone broth becomes a logical choice. But that level of biochemical knowledge, nutritional knowledge, and childcare knowledge is rather specialized in that context. And as much as he's obviously a very clever bounty hunter who cares about foundlings, there's pretty much zero evidence that he has had any hand in actually raising any foundlings. Again, as Pele said, he has a lot to learn. So how did he know to get the bone broth? Once time might have been coincidence. But then there is Pele. She is a classic mechanic character, extremely competent at her one job, probably knows more about ships than most mechanics even in the core worlds. But she clearly is more friendly with droids than with people. She's rather scruffy around the edges socially, and probably knows just as much about raising an infant as she would know about how to work at the crowd at an imperial gala. You expect her to be able to fix the Razorback. You don't really expect her to have high-functioning levels of knowledge about infant nutrition for a species she's never met before. But still, the moment her droids question her on what kind of food to get for the baby, she goes, I don't know, something with bones. That's kind of an odd thing to say, especially for a mechanic who tends to be precise when making orders for things. She wants a bolt of this diameter that needs this kind of torque to apply it. But she just says something with bones. That's the kind of impulsive thought that a baby would have. And whereas a bounty hunter has to be clever in diverse situations, constantly reacting to new things, a mechanic has to keep her cleverness focused on the task at hand. For as much as it's possible that the Mando figured out that the baby needed calcium from observing him eat frogs, Pele hasn't seen him eat anything. She has no reason to come to this conclusion, but still, she jumps right to it. Something with bones. How did she know? Jumping back to that craving for saltine crackers, you weirdo. Humans actually lack the ability to fully digest processed carbohydrates, which is basically what a saltine cracker is. Big honking carbohydrate molecules baked together. In the same way, termites lack the ability to process wood, but they still chew through the bottom of your house. Horses lack the ability to process grass, but you still see them out there grazing all day. We can all eat these things thanks to the symbiotes we carry around in our digestive tract. For us humans, it's mostly our little friend called, and please excuse my pronunciation, I'm not a microbiologist, Bacteroides thetauthaumicron. When our little friends get hungry, they send a signal up our vagus nerve and tell our brains to munch some crackers or bread or anything else that can provide them with those delicious, delicious carbohydrates that they crave. We send the salty goodness down and they break it up, sending our brain glucose as payment for services rendered. But that craving, that knowledge of what you want, that isn't coming from you. That is coming from them. That's their voice yelling up to your brain. This sharing of nutritional cravings is perhaps one of the most common symbiotic relationships in nature. We already know that the child is strong with the Force. It is entirely likely that the infants of this species have a way to communicate their needs to their caregivers as subtle mental suggestions. It would certainly be more efficient than the human method of just listening to the kid cry until you guess what he wants. It is strongly suggested, this mental relationship, when the Mando ordered the bone broth. Again, the Mando might have been able to figure it out on his own. It's just unlikely. The suggestion was strong enough there that I was able to see it immediately. However, I am a wildlife ecologist, and I do look for that sort of relationship in between species as part of my daily job. Again, Yoda's a little bit cuter than most species I have to deal with, but it's the same principle. However, I wasn't the only one to notice it. I noted a few other comments on websites suggesting this symbiotic or parasitic relationship. But then episode 5 happened. They put the words into the mouth of someone who very obviously shouldn't have known them. This suggests to me as an author that the writers are trying to make a point of this. The child's symbiotic relationship with his caregivers is going to come into play later in this season. Now, where could the writers be going with this point? Perhaps setting up a moral quandary for the Mando. Does he really care for the child, or is he simply bowing to the will of the parasite? I genuinely don't think that that's where they're going with this conflict. Forced mind tricks or not, the guy has a soft spot for foundlings. That was established well before he even got near the child. The audience knows this, but future villains might not. Perhaps they're setting up a situation where someone, perhaps a snappily dressed moth, thinks that once Mando is freed of this control, he would be willing to give up the child, accept the bounty, and be gone. Of course, this would lead into them getting their assumptions whistling birded in their teeth, but it would be a lovely scene to see. Now, that's all just theory and speculation on my part. At this point, all we can say is that it's highly likely that Baby Yoda has some Force-based influence on his caretakers, and that the writers want the audience to recognize it for what it is, for some future plot point. Until we get to see where they're going with this, slurp yourself a nice cup of bone broth and feed your own little symbiotes with some saltine crackers. If you think I'm making too much of a minor scene or two, leave a comment below telling me exactly how wrong I am. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and I will see you next time. Have a beautiful day.